minutes. So I'd like to introduce our um, opening address speaker, Ginny Pupo-Walker. She, her pronouns, the executive director for the Tennessee for the Education Trust. Thank you.
Good morning. How's everybody doing? Everybody's very spread out. The teacher in me wants to bring everybody together, but we're gonna move forward here. So my name is Gini Pupo-Walker. I work for the Education Trust Tennessee. We are an advocacy, policy, and research organization based in Washington, D.C., but we have offices in 7 states, including one here in Tennessee. We're based in Nashville. And I'm going to talk today a little bit about the policy and legislative landscape in Tennessee right now, and encourage you to take some notes because I'm going to give you some homework assignments if you are interested in engaging with legislators during this very, very critical time in our legislative session. And so I am excited to be here. I want to congratulate you all for hosting this conference, want to give a special thank you to all of the organizers here, Professor Langston for putting this on. I don't know if you are aware of this, but in the legislative landscape where I operate most of the time, simply hosting this is an act of courage, especially during a legislative session. So I want you to know that I am deeply grateful for all that you're doing and your voices today and every day. So this is me. I am a native Nashvilleian, grew up raised by Cuban father and a mother from rural Tennessee. And so I grew up always knowing I wanted to be a teacher. And that's what I did. I taught high school for a number of years and moved out the classroom to do administration in Metro Nashville Public Schools, eventually left to work in nonprofits, served on the school board in Nashville up until 2 years ago, and have been really active in policy and in advocacy in Tennessee for quite some time. So just quickly about the Education Trust, we are a national nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that was formed out of the formation, the sort of the passage of No Child Left Behind. No Child Left Behind was a federal law that really illuminated. Are you coming to tell me something? Oh, you're not taking questions. Illuminated sort of gaps in achievement and opportunity for students, particularly students of color, low-income students. And so Education Trust formed to really try to identify the root causes of those gaps and solutions in K-12 schools across the country. We opened our office in Tennessee 4 years ago, right before the pandemic, and all of our advocacy is targeted at state level policymakers, which I'll talk about here shortly. And we have really worked hard to advance policy that we believe promotes education justice, opportunity for students, particularly students of color, low-income students, students who've been marginalized in education settings in Tennessee. We also are the organizing sort of lead organization for the Tennessee Alliance for Equity in Education. We have 85 organizational members across the state. And we're very proud of that. It's a very diverse coalition. GLSEN has been a member of our coalition since our inception, and we have had many, many opportunities to advocate with them on a host of issues. We also have a subset of our alliance called the Tennessee Truth in Classrooms Coalition. And this is a coalition we formed several years ago just to sort of take on the book banning, the anti-CRT movement, anti-DEI movement. That is a subset of about 30 partners, maybe 40 at this point, who work together to oppose that legislation, which I'll talk about in a minute. So we have in our policy agenda 5 areas that we work on. You can see them here. I'm not going to read them to you. We find that there are hundreds and hundreds of bills every year in the Tennessee State Legislature on education alone, and we filter those by priority. And we have a bill tracker. If you sign up for our newsletter, you can get a weekly newsletter letting folks know the progress of those bills, where they're going, what we're opposed to, what we're supporting, what we're monitoring. And we have lots of information and tools on our Alliance website, which you'll get more of here at the end of this presentation. And so how do we operate during legislative session? We have a government relations team, and we take all kinds of actions. In fact, today, at this moment, our team is finalizing the touches on a sign-on letter for advocates across the state, including any of you that want to join, to oppose arming teachers with guns in schools, which is a bill that is moving quickly and probably going to be heard next week. And so we sometimes have to take very quick real-time action to oppose something or to support something. And so these are examples of that. Last year, the arming teachers bill came up. We had a sign-on letter. We had 3,000 signatures within 48 hours, but we didn't have to send it because the bill was pulled in all of the covenant sort of protests and all of the things that were happening at that time. We've also had many, many sign-on letters opposing book bans. We've had folks testify. We've had all kinds of action related to that. And we've also been very actively opposed to the voucher bill that is currently the sort of the top education issue happening this legislative session. Let's see here. This is not wanting to forward. Can you forward the slide? Yeah. I don't know why it's stuck. There we go. So I don't know if you know of our friends at the Tennessee Equality Project who track bills related to, in particular, related to what we call the slate of hate. They call the slate of hate, which are bills that are directly targeting issues related to LGBTQ students and their families. And so these were bills that passed last year. So public chapter means that it is now law. It is now the law of the state of Tennessee. There are 6 here that passed. You should also know that there were numerous bills that failed, right? And so there are constantly bills being proposed that do not pass, but these passed last year. And if you're tracking what's happening in Tennessee, you're aware of at least some of these, right? Particularly the ones that got the most attention around drag performances, gender affirming care. And so these are the kinds of things that are being proposed and passed in our Tennessee state legislature. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can sort of use your voice, if you're so inclined, to do something about that. And so our next slide is the slate of hate for this year. And the bills that you see here have not passed, right? These are bills that are active in the state legislature today. And so the top one, banning pride flags in public schools. This one's gotten a lot of attention, including nationally. And this is sponsored by Representative Gino Bulso from Williamson County. It has passed in the House, meaning that most Republicans in the House, including a faculty member that works at MTSU, voted for it. And it is now stuck in the Senate. And I want you to think about writing a note to Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally, who is holding this. It's called Holding at the Desk. He's holding this bill at his desk. And he has said publicly on the record that he finds that this will meet constitutional challenges, that it will not be constitutional. And so I urge you to write him and ask him to continue to hold it, to defer it, to not move it. Can we take questions at the end? It's important that he knows that there are people watching, paying attention, and appreciate his leadership in this moment. Sometimes silence doesn't mean you're agreeing. Sometimes silence means you are actively in the background doing something to halt, to stop something from happening. So Randy McNally is the lieutenant governor, which is the fancy term for the leader of the Senate. So he's an important person to acknowledge and communicate with at this time. We also have these other bills that are moving that you can see that are directly related to impacting LGBTQ students, their families, their friends, their allies. And some of these are directly related to school issues, education issues, requiring teachers to report students who want to come out to them on their identity. And these things are, as we know, very, very harmful. And very dangerous for students. And so I encourage you to learn more about these bills and to write the sponsors of the bills, write your state legislators, Senate and House, and let them know your thoughts on that, right? And why it matters to you that these bills do not move forward. So next slide. I'm going to go back 1 second. I want to talk a little bit about this bottom one, removing DEI programs from college campuses. This is an example of a win. There was a bill that was moved, and these are bills that are written in by national organizations like ALEC, and they are handed to legislators in every state, conservative legislators, word for word, this is the bill we want you to pass. This is a bill that has passed in Texas and in Florida. And it would be a bill to completely dismantle all DEI programs on college campuses and remove employees that work on DEI issues. And they have tailored the wording very carefully based on sort of findings in Texas and Florida, where they have caveats, right? And one of those caveats is if you are applying for or receiving a federal grant that requires you to have DEI language or programming, it keeps it protects that funding, right? But this bill failed in the higher ed subcommittee, which is fascinating to me. It didn't get a single aye vote. So that's good. That's progress. But we do believe it'll come back. But these are the kind of things that we are fighting day in and day out. So next slide. So these are examples of students. If you have not participated in a rally or a march or a day on the Hill at our state legislature, I encourage you to do so. Your presence is needed more than ever. We need diverse voices up at our legislature. We need folks up there to hear from different types of Tennesseans from different parts of the state, not just Nashville and Memphis. And it is important that they understand that people are paying attention. And it can be a daunting experience to be up at our legislature. We train advocates every year on how to do that successfully. You're welcome to sign up for our mailing list to be an individual member of our alliance. And we do training and take folks on the Hill every year. So next slide. So just quickly about advocacy, if you're not familiar, I don't want to assume anything about our audience here, but advocacy is an essential part of sort of your right as a person who lives in the United States, that you have a right to exercise your voice through voting, through advocacy, through communicating with your elected officials. I was an elected official myself. They have an obligation to not block you on social media. They don't have an obligation to meet with you, but you can write to them. You can try to make appointments with them. And so I encourage you to think about how you can best connect your story as a student, as a faculty member, as a resident, as an interested constituent on why particular issues matter to you. So, okay. And so when we think about an advocacy campaign and we think about campaigns related to the bills that I put up on the slides earlier, we have to be it's a serious endeavor if you want to be successful. And one of the things you have to do is understand what issue you're talking about, right? What is the exact issue you're talking about? And then who has the power to change that? So if you're talking about selecting curriculum and books in schools in Rutherford County, that's not a state legislature issue. That's your school board issue. That's your superintendent issue. If you're talking about banning DEI offices, that's a legislative issue. You need to talk to your legislator, right? If you're talking about funding for different programs, that's the governor who decides that. So it's important to know who has the power to do what, so you use your energy wisely. And then, what is it we want to accomplish with our campaign? What is the outcome we want to see? You have to be very concrete about that. We want to have a bill die. We want to have a bill progress. We want to have a bill blocked. And so those are the things that you have to do. You have to think about in order to be successful. And so it's important to know who are the decision makers in Tennessee on the issues that we're talking about today. So number one is the executive branch. Governor Lee, the governor's office, has an outsized amount of power in Tennessee on education issues. He appoints the members of the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. He appoints the members of the Tennessee Board of Regents. He appoints the Commissioner of Education in Tennessee. He appoints the state board, or he has now joint appointment with the legislature, the State Board of Education in Tennessee. So these are all incredibly powerful positions that make really important regulatory decisions on a whole host of issues. And so it's important to understand what his power is and then how to influence his power, right? And then there's the legislative branch. Legislature meets every year, usually from January to late April, May. And they have a 2-year cycle. So if a bill is introduced in the first year of the cycle, it can be brought back the second year if it doesn't move. And then they have to start over again. And so legislative branch, there's a Senate and a House. If you're not aware, it's a supermajority of Republicans, meaning if every Democrat walked out, they could still pass every bill that comes before them. And so it's really important to understand that you cannot get something done in Tennessee if you're only focusing on Democrats. You have to find a way to convince Republicans to your issue. right? To work across lines of difference to get something done. And so that's what we try to do every day. And then there's the State Board of Education. This is a K-12 body. They will, if a law is passed in Tennessee, the state board then takes that law, creates the rules for implementation on that law. They can have a tremendous amount of power in that process. And then the last one is what we call local education agencies, LEAs, also known as school districts. School districts have elected boards of education, an appointed superintendent. They also have a lot of power and decisions that are made at the local level based on students. And so what's not up here is also, in the higher ed realm, the Tennessee Higher Education Commission, which oversees four-year universities. The Tennessee Board of Regents oversees community colleges. Those folks also have a lot of power on setting tuition rates, on a whole host of issues related to the process of higher education in Tennessee. And so when you think about advocacy, right, if you are interested in working on campaigns, if you're interested in getting something done on an issue you care about, whatever it is, these are the different ways that happens, right? You can train people up. That's what we call capacity building. Hold workshops, train advocates on how to tell their story, train advocates on how to write a statement of opposition, to write a sign-on letter, right? Champion development means identifying people of power, typically policymakers, to be your champion of your issue, to adopt your issue, to carry your issue forward, right? How do you do that? You cultivate relationships, you convince them, you show them data, you have them learn stories, you have to meet constituents, people affected by policy, to convince them to take on your issue. Coalition building. So this is an example of a coalition, an informal coalition, but y'all are all aligned on a set of issues. You want to learn more, you want to activate on it. And so how do you collectively harness that power? That's really important, right? Community organizing, that happens in a whole host of different ways. Demonstration programs, that's if I want to work on a ninth grade dropout prevention program. I'm going to show you a program in a high school in Murfreesboro that is doing exceptional work as a demonstration of why this issue matters and we can solve it. Sometimes it takes litigation. This is where folks like the ACLU are essential to blocking, to killing, to stopping laws that have passed that we know are harmful. And so they are an essential part of this process. Litigation is sometimes the last and best tool to stop harmful legislation. Media advocacy, this is when you have to cultivate your reporters, your media, to understand your issue. A lot of education reporters do not understand education. I have educated countless reporters. They don't understand the basics of education of your issues. If you reach out to a reporter and say, I want to help you understand why X, Y, and Z matters, they will listen because they need people to give them information and context. The rest of these are also, media model legislation, helping write a bill for a legislator. They will help take your input on a bill. Legislative advocacy, public polling. Polling is expensive but can be persuasive. Regulatory feedback, and of course, voter outreach. Getting people to vote is really essential. I know you know that. And so we, use all these different advocacy tools to get our work done. It takes a whole lot of energy and a lot of time, particularly in a legislative session. But we feel like it's tremendously important. Some of the most persuasive voices in our legislature are students. If students can get before legislators, if they can testify, they can move votes. It's very important that students are a part of this process. And lastly, I'm going to put up 2 QR codes. One is to our advocacy hub. On that hub, you can find tools on how the legislature works, how to find your legislator, how bills move in Tennessee, how to make your voice heard, how to power map on your issue. And then the second one is our Coalition for Truth in Classrooms. This is our coalition that is really working to fight all of the bills, that the slate of hate that I talked about earlier. Sometimes we have national partners that come in and help us with that. But we have a lot of folks across Tennessee that are very concerned about bills that are moving and are trying to actively work to stop them. So I have a couple of minutes. I'll take any questions. I know we had a question over here earlier. Okay. Any other questions? Any thoughts? Yes.
Sorry, it has to go on the mic so it goes out to Zoom.
Yep.
I thank you for the presentation. That was really good. I'm sitting here with my friend Jessica. We've started a nonprofit in Rutherford County to fight the book bans. Originally, we started in the public library system fighting against that, the Rutherford County Library Alliance. And we've since taken it to the public schools since we found out the county schools were secretly removing dozens of books from the county school libraries. The issue that we're running into since forming is trying to figure out how to build a coalition. Because right now it's 5 of us. And we get a lot of messages that people are watching and supporting, but it's 5 of us and it's exhausting. And we've tried to reach out and build with other groups, other nonprofits and other grassroots groups that are fighting this. But do you have any suggestions on how we can do that more effectively?
So, so there's a group in Williamson County called One Wilco that does this very same work. They also take on things like bullying, harassment. They've challenged the district to address racial discrimination, injustice, bullying in the district. They also take on book bans and libraries. There's 2 of them. So you outnumber them. And they're not paid. Right? They raise mini grants, 1 mini grant at a time. I would reach out to them. So I want you to reach out to me. You can find me on the website. We can connect you. I want you all to join our Truth in Classrooms Coalition. We have monthly meetings. We offer a lot of tools, a lot of ways to testify, to get involved. We have partners in Chattanooga, Moms for Social Justice in Chattanooga doing this work. Pen America, a national, and Penguin Random House come to our meetings every month. They are trying to actively figure out how to litigate against these book bannings in Tennessee. They have an active one right now with the Tennessee Education Association on this prohibited concepts bill. So there are people actively working at, the CRT movement threw us off, but we're back on our feet. We're trying to figure out how to counter it. I think people in general, polling shows, people are opposed to book bannings. 80% of Tennesseans oppose censoring teachers. So we just have to make sure legislators understand that. I think maybe I can take one more question. Oh, we have 2.
Whose hand was
He's got to hustle.
Who was first?
So how do you connect with other states outside of just Tennessee?
Sure do. So we run a coalition. There are coalitions in lots of states that work on similar things, and we often, so we have a convener that brings us together to talk about strategy, best practice. So we are in partnership with folks in Georgia, North Carolina, Kentucky, Louisiana, across the country. Yep, absolutely. And this work that I'm doing is happening in many, many, many states. It takes different forms, but it is the same sort of movement. I think we had one more question. No? Did we not? Okay, we're out of time. Thank you so much. Please, check out our stuff. Sign up to join our alliance if you'd like as an individual member and get on our mailing list. You will be the most informed person in town. Thank you.
On behalf of the conference planners, supporters, MTSU Lambda Association, the College of Behavioral and Health Sciences, and the Conference Advisory Board, thank you for your support of our efforts to present this worthwhile event. We want to especially thank you for your commitment to staying strong, and we ask that you accept this small token of our appreciation.